Hello, welcome back everybody to the 2026 Psychosis Care Conference, day 2. As we begin today's virtual gathering, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Pasco, Washington, on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Confederated Tribes and bands of the Yakama Nation and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. These are communities who've cared for this land and the Columbia River for generations. I want to recognize the history and their ongoing connection to this place, and also acknowledge the history of displacement and harm Indigenous communities have faced while honoring that they're still here, still strong. Because this is a virtual gathering, we recognize that participants are joining from many places across Washington state and the country. We invite each of you to take a moment to reflect on the Indigenous lands from which you are participating and the communities who have taken care of it. May this acknowledgement help ground us as we move forward together with respect and care. Once again, thank you all for being here. Thank you to En Route for having me. It's an honor and a blessed opportunity, so thank you again. I now want to present Diana Cockrell, who leads the prenatal to 25 behavioral health team at the Washington State Healthcare Authority. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you, Cassie. Welcome, everybody. It's so inspiring to see the audience here from both here in Washington and the nation and from other parts of the world. So good morning, good afternoon, or whatever time of day it is where you are joining from. As Cassie said, my name is Diana Cockrell. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as section manager of the prenatal through age 25 behavioral health team at the Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery in the Washington State Healthcare Authority. I am honored to get to be here with all of you and to welcome you back to day 2 of this incredible Psychosis Care Conference. Yesterday, we came together to learn from and celebrate with individuals with lived and living experience and learned so much. Our keynote, Cody Green, sharing so much wisdom, the importance of early intervention, of being ready to go when the window of opportunity reveals itself, the importance of telling our stories and how that's how we reach people and make change. What an example Cody set for us in that. From there, we learned how tabletop role play games can translate into interpersonal and reality testing skills through partnership and fun, that families go into crisis together, and the importance of working with the whole system and moving out of crisis to best support that person. That families and loved ones are going to be the first line of support and must take care of themselves first. We explored the tension of caring for a loved one that needs care and ensuring support for the person to care for themselves with support as they become able. We learned about the power of approach, the non-confrontational Columbo-style preference rather than a Sherlock Holmes style. We learned we took a deep dive into perspectives of philosophies and how we understand people from different perspectives, and the importance of suspending judgment and staying aware of any preconceived constructs of how we think identity is or should be constructed or structured. There were resounding echoes in all of the rooms that there is hope, that there is community here, and we are not alone. And the importance of ensuring the person being served is seen as an expert along with the rest of the team. We also got to hear from some of our new Journeys teams members about the innovative work they are doing in their communities. Today, we get to continue on our journey together to learn and share in solidarity. We'll hear from experts with living experience and clinical experience about the evolving landscape of early intervention and recovery. We'll learn about some of the creative ways people come together for support and to educate others about what it means to live with psychosis. These conversations not only strengthen our collective knowledge, but reinforce the truth that recovery is real and that it means different things at different times in our lives. Once again, thank you. We are grateful each of you choose to be here, to be present, for your willingness to both share and receive new perspectives, and for being willing to share what you were learning here with your networks and with your loved ones in the coming days months, and years. Thank you to our speakers, our organizers, and everyone who has made this event possible. Thank you. Welcome, Cassie. I'm handing it back to you to guide us into our next.
Thank you so much, Diana. Um, I now want to introduce what is called Beyond the Break, an open conversation about life after psychosis. And our keynote panelist is going to be Kit Wallis, Sean Driscoll, and Carolynn Murray. I want to introduce them with a brief introduction for each of them, starting with Carolynn Murray. She is a mental health advocate who focuses on psychosis education and awareness. Her advocacy stems from her lived experience with schizoaffective disorder and started with online videos, but has spread to include live and virtual discussions, involvement with psychosis, research as a consultant, and projects with University of Washington, Stanford University, and University of Texas. She has also been featured in the NPR podcast Lost Patients as a lived expert experience expert. So that is Carolynn. Next, we have Kit Wallis, who goes by Schizo Kitso on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Is a content creator who advocates for schizoaffective and bipolar disorder. Her content centers around her personal experience with schizoaffective disorder and often includes deep dives into research topics regarding mental health. She was diagnosed with bipolar type of schizoaffective disorder in late 2020 and has struggled with symptoms since she was in middle school. Schizoaffective disorder is a mental health condition where someone experiences symptoms of schizophrenia, such as delusions and hallucinations, but also symptoms of mood disorder, either major depression or, in Kit's case, bipolar. Realizing there was a lack of schizoaffective advocates, she decided to start her Schizo project to raise awareness for the complex condition. The mission of Schizo is to educate and bring awareness of schizoaffective disorder and all of its aspects. From the mood side to the psychotic side, Kit strives to bridge the gap between life and science so she can help break the stigma around mental health. Last but not least, we have Sean Scoe Romero Discro. Is a 30-year-old mental health professional, musician, and entrepreneur. February marked 10 years of experience in the mental health field, starting as a residential crisis facilitator and now serving as a consultant at the UMD School of Medicine. There, Sean trains peer support specialists in Maryland Early Intervention Program, one of which he was once a patient from 2012 to 2014. Sean's journey as a patient and professional who involves resilience and an unconventional approach to treatment. In 2023, after being impacted by side effects tied to a medication lawsuit for 10 years, Sean went medication-free with bipolar 1, finding his own unique path to recovery. Much of his advocacy now centers around pro-choice treatment, anatomy, actively sharing his extensive Eastern-Western infused self-care routine, and teaching the science behind it. Sean emphasizes his key to maintaining med-free stability and strict discipline in his routine and a proactive self-empowerment mindset rooted in neuroscience. Due to pain from consistently not feeling heard and not being trusted with making his own decisions, Sean co-created the Beyond Limits installation through his company, Be Limitless LLC. The unique leadership training walks people through the process of better understanding themselves and others in order to create kinder, more connected culture in institutions. Sean uses his voice and vulnerability and hopes to help usher in a healthier world with less limits. Find links to his music, his TED Talk, and learn more on his website at www.blemitless.community. So, welcome, Kit, Sean, and Carolyn.
All right, guys, thank you so much for having us and for introducing us. And I'm really excited to get going with this fireside chat of talking about psychosis and different aspects of psychosis. And so, before the conference, we asked you guys, the audience, for questions about psychosis that you might have for each of us. And you did absolutely fantastic. We have so many good questions to answer. So if that sounds good to you, sit back, grab a beverage, and let's get into it. So the very first question, which is actually a question for all three of us, is how would you describe psychosis to a layperson, non-medical? And someone named Heidi F. submitted this question. And I would say, for me, psychosis and the way I experience it now, which is where I have insight into it. So I usually know I'm experiencing psychosis when I'm experiencing psychosis. And it kind of comes across as an overlay over the real world. So it's like I'm still aware of what's going on around me in the real world, but I'm hearing things that aren't there. And sometimes I'm seeing things that aren't there. And I have to deal with those things in addition to the real world. And most of the time, I can separate them and be okay. But sometimes it's hard for me to deal with what I'm seeing or hearing while also dealing with seeing and hearing real people. And so psychosis to me is this extra bit of things I have to deal with that kind of is in addition to the world that I'm already living in. And that sounds pretty complicated. And that's because it is. But that's how it is for me. And it's important to say that psychosis is different for everyone who experiences it. So what I experience is not what Sean and Carolyn experience. So now I'm going to pass it off to Carolyn for her to talk about what psychosis is like for her.
Thanks, Kit. For me, psychosis tends to come with like a lack of insight, where Kit was talking about having an awareness of being psychotic. I typically don't know that I'm psychotic, and I'm fully immersed in this separate reality from the reality that everyone else shares. And if I were to describe exactly like an analogy for what that's like, I think it's a lot like a dream. When you're dreaming, you don't typically know that you're dreaming, and you just kind of accept what's happening as real without questioning it. And what's real will be pretty bizarre things or not things you can really understand. And if you think of it like lucid dreaming, you have that kind of dreaming with insight where you're aware, at least that you're dreaming, but you're still in this kind of phenomenal environment in this world that's not real to anyone but you. So my psychosis is kind of like my own version of reality. It's just as real to me as anyone else's reality. It's just a separate reality. And when I seem to be acting really irrational or having responses to things that seem out of line, it's really more like a rational response to an irrational situation, because anything that could happen in psychosis, while it may not happen to anyone outside of it, it would be a rational response to, say, like an alien abduction. Maybe I'm afraid of being abducted, or maybe I think I'm being spied on, and anyone would probably act that way. So to me, it's perfectly normal to have these irrational responses. So, Sean, what would you like to say?
Yes, thank you, Carolyn and Kit, for your insight. I think for me, with bipolar and psychosis and being hospitalized, I've experienced at a young age, I've experienced both sides of, I guess, perceptions of psychosis. Depth would be the underlying thing in terms of there's a deep inquisitive nature within myself, a deep desire to learn and see things almost to the point of where I'm losing aspect of reality when I am searching in comparison to now understanding that there's a depth in the way that I think as someone with bipolar and neurodivergence, and sort of how the psychosis sort of overlaps with both of those things. Psychosis was debilitating at 16 as I spent 3 months in Shepherd Pratt, and that's a mental health hospital here in Baltimore. And as a young adult now who went med free, I don't experience psychosis in a debilitating way, but I would say that there is uh, sort of an ability to see things differently than other people, and create differently. And there's a gift component to it. I sort of look at it more on a spiritual sense and synchronicities, and sort of I do see reality differently, but I also have experienced a very difficult and debilitating version of psychosis. And my bipolar is both challenging and has been challenging, and going med free over the last 3 years can be also very challenging to remain stable, and we'll talk about a little bit of that later. But that transitions us into the next question, which is, what advice do you have for, sorry, I have a piece of paper here. I like to use my pen and pad. What advice do you have for supporting someone who has an illness like schizophrenia or bipolar, but is not ready to receive treatment and in denial about having the condition and needing help? How can we best support them during this stage of ambivalence and encourage them to consider seeking care? Sarah McCauley asked. And so I think that the first step for this is to remember our role as a professional. I've worked in the field for about 10 years now. And one of the things that works best for me is remembering that it's first my job to help someone with their treatment, right? And a lot of times we have an awareness as providers, professionals, etc., that this person might not have. And as a patient, I wasn't really, if someone was telling me that I should be doing something, well, it's not going to be really effective if I'm in the stage of change that is non-contemplative, right? If I'm in that first stage of change, pre-contemplation, I'm not aware. There's a different approach that works best when we're not aware, and that is to step back and connect. And you do that because you can't control people into compliance. It doesn't work. Instead, when you connect, the naturally you'll be able to have an influence in this person's treatment through the trust that's built from connecting. So it's more of a natural process, and remembering that it's not our lives, it's their lives. And so as much as we want to help, and it comes from good intentions, we have to allow people to make their choices if they're not a threat to themselves or other people. We have to be patient in the process of doing that and get to know someone. Like a lot of times we are here and it's very business in a helping profession, right? It's meant to be connective. Like if someone is not engaging, well, find out what they're watching on their phone while they're in your office. Like find out what they're listening to when they're not here. And maybe, like, I don't know, surprise them and have it playing the next time they walk in. Have their favorite artist playing or something. Get creative. We got to get creative with connecting. Kit, did you want to weigh in? I know that you had that question listed as well.
Yeah, totally, totally. You actually like hit the nail on the head about the trust thing because when people ask me about like usually it's like a parent with a kid who isn't open to receiving treatment or someone struggling to take their medication or just in denial about their illness, I usually try to tell people to just talk to them, listen to them. And I think people would be surprised to learn that those who experience psychosis, that hear voices, that see things, that have delusions, they kind of want to talk about it a lot of the time. And if you're talking to them about these things they're experiencing with not necessarily an open mind in the sense of believing what they're saying, but an open mind in the sense of just being open to hearing stuff that really, frankly, a lot of psychosis has a lot of shock value. But if you can get through that and actually listen to them talk about what they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're going through, you can build trust. And when you build trust, you can urge people to get help. You can't make someone have insight. You can't convince somebody that they're not delusional when they're in a delusional state. The insight usually comes with with treatment over time. It's very rare to get insight without that. But it's very important to develop that trust, to connect, like what Sean said. And I really do like that he brought up doing things other than the treatment and the condition to kind of have a more holistic view of the person. And so that's kind of what I always tell people is just listen to them, build trust, and then through that trust, you can have the person hopefully receive help, hopefully receive treatment, hopefully get insight and get out of the pit that is psychosis and schizophrenia, bipolar, and other psychotic disorders. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that one. And yeah, that's a really important question because I get asked it a lot. So I'm so glad that Sarah asked that question. So Carolyn, I think you've got the next one.
Yeah, this question comes from Lee Baker. It is what kinds of non-medicine slash therapy modalities are most effective for people who are deep in psychosis, hallucinations, and delusions? I really love this question because I know that medication is just the start for me, and there's a lot of other resources that can be so immensely helpful, even when you aren't on medication or medication doesn't work. There's cognitive behavioral therapy for psychosis, which is a type of talk therapy that helps people to cope with their psychosis, to learn how to challenge their beliefs and have less distress around their experiences, how to improve their daily life. It's a really great tool for people who are in psychosis and also to help them prevent relapse into further psychosis. I also really love what is it? Hold on a second. Recovery oriented cognitive therapy. This is really great. It's kind of an extension off of CBTP and it's very motivational. I really love that it's so encouraging because it allows patients with psychosis or recovering from psychosis to have more say in their care, how to set goals for themselves and have motivation to overcome whatever symptoms are really what they're struggling with. I know a lot of times negative symptoms, which are the symptoms that affect a person's motivation, their, pleasure in their hobbies or socializing, hygiene, you know, like having expression, those kind of symptoms can't necessarily be treated with medication. And so it's kind of up to the individual to find workarounds, which you can find with CTR, recovery oriented cognitive therapy. And I actually brought a book to share that I really love. I don't know if it won't show, but
Yes, yes,
there
yes,
we
yes,
go.
yes.
This is such a great this is such a great book. It's called Living Well with Psychosis by Dr. Erin Brennan, and I'm having trouble showing it, but this is like my lifeline for recovering from psychosis. It's really great for people who are going through psychosis themselves or for their loved ones. And I really love that it kind of puts the person going through it like in the driver's seat and allows them to make decisions about their care and where they're going with their goals. It's also just written like so friendly, like you're talking to your best friend who's just guiding you through this experience. I'm personally friends with the author, and he's just one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet. So this book I definitely recommend to anyone going through psychosis or their loved ones or family. It's like just my lifeline. Anyway, Kit, what would you like to share?
Oh my goodness. So yes, I'm gonna echo Living Well with Psychosis, fantastic book that kind of it offers a perspective of you're with a friend who is helping you recover from psychosis and all aspects of psychotic disorders. So it's a really good book. I also like that book a lot. But for me, things that weren't medication based, but were kind of more therapy based. It goes back to the fact that my psychotic break that I had in 2018 absolutely wrecked and ruined my life. I lost my living situation, I lost my friends, I lost dreams, really. And as a result, I was left with basically nothing. And so I had to start from scratch. And so what I did was I ended up in a psychiatric hospital because I thought that that would help me. And in a way it did. And in some ways it didn't. It was kind of a neutral experience. But while I was in there, I was talking to a therapist and I was telling her what was going on. I was telling her how out of control I felt, how my moods were like running my life in a bad way, and I was still dealing with psychosis. And she told me that I should look for a DBT program or a dialectical behavior therapy program. And so I left the psych ward and I went to my psychiatrist at the time and I told him, I said, hey, I think I need DBT. It's been recommended to me. I think it will help me get my life together. And he said, well, we have a program here. And so I went through a class. It was 6 months of weekly classes, weekly therapy, and really, DBT is not like any other therapy that you have ever heard of. It was developed in the late 1980s by a woman named Marsha Linehan, who is honestly one of my biggest heroes, partially because DBT saved my life, but she's also an amazing, amazing person as well. But DBT is composed of four main modules. The first is mindfulness, which teaches you to live in the moment, appreciate the moment, and just go through your life in a way where you are able to be present and participate in the moment. And I think that's really important, and it's the backbone of all of DBT. Then you have distress tolerance. That's the second module, which is what it sounds like. It teaches you how to tolerate distress. But more accurately, it teaches you how to survive crisis situations, to deal with the big, heavy stuff that would otherwise cause you to engage in bad, destructive habits that just make everything worse. And so it teaches you to get through those things, to deal with stuff that would otherwise send you into a panic and maybe an anxiety attack, panic attack, cause you to engage in a bad habit per se. And it just helps you get through all that. The next thing is interpersonal effectiveness. That's the third module. And believe it or not, DBT teaches you how to make friends. It teaches you how to maintain friendships and relationships while maintaining self-respect and how to leave toxic and dangerous ones if you have to. There's a lot of acronyms in DBT, and you basically just go through the acronyms and they help you out with areas of your life. And the final thing is emotion regulation. And that is like distress tolerance. That is what it sounds like. It teaches you how to regulate your emotions. But in my world with it, it's more accurately that it teaches you how to change emotions when they need to be changed, because sometimes an emotion doesn't match the situation and you need to change it in order to be present in the situation and deal with the situation. So it helps you shift emotions and deal with emotions and regulate your emotions. And I love DBT. And so going through DBT, I was able to recover from the mess that psychosis dumped on me. And I was able to become a better person, participate in my life. And I truly believe that DBT is the reason that I'm able to have a regular 9 to 5 job, multiple hobbies, be a content creator, be a YouTuber, do amazing events like this. And it really has helped me. But it kind of helped me in a more indirect way, in a way that it wasn't exactly helping me deal with psychosis specifically, although some aspects did, but it helped me deal with the aftermath of psychosis and how much it had messed up my life. So yeah, I love DBT. I love DBT so, so, so much. Yeah. All right. Sean, I think you're up.
Yes, thank you, Kit, for sharing, and Carolyn also. I also know Dr. Brennan, and his sentiment, Carolyn's sentiments about his character. He's a wonderful guy. So if he's in the audience, shout out to Aaron. Nice to see you. Um, the question that I had are regarding what are some actionable tips to prevent, manage, and mitigate episodes of psychosis, such as specific coping skills or interventions? And Drew asked that question, which kind of piggybacks off of the last questions that have been asked, or the last question that Carolyn and Kit answered. And I'm going to go outside of the office and talk about the other times that we're not in treatment, right? What are we doing with the 99% of our time, to take care of ourselves, right? And one thing about me is that if I'm med free, you better believe that I have a lot of coping skills that I have had to build out and learn and utilize. So the first thing that I did in my journey of going med free, I went and I cut out fast food and soda, and I went to the gym. And I hated going to the gym. I was 275 pounds 3 years ago, and that's about 90 pounds heavier than I am now. And I hated every moment of it, but I did something that I call feel, do, reflect. Feel my pain, do it anyway, do whatever it is, because what happens, you're building new through neuroscience and David Goggins' mentality is really where I got a lot of this from, actually, believe it or not. But you rewire what you believe to be capable of. And a lot of the coping skills that I utilize are connected to neuroscience, gut health. I've done parasite cleanses. I've done parasite detoxes. I've actually done a 30-day orange detox. I'm a big believer in fasting. Oranges are an astringent fruit. Fruit is water and vitamins, and it's hydrating and it's satiating and it clears your adrenal glands, it clears your lymphs, and it helps you. It is very calming for me. It's life. I'm sensitive to the energy of food, so processed foods give me anxiety. Meat makes me irritated, and gut bacteria is linked to symptoms through research of a couple different things. I know there's a study with regards to now, schizophrenia and multiple sclerosis, and what we're seeing is an increase in bad gut bacteria and a low level of good bacteria. And so anything that I could get my hands on that might work, I tried. And my friend had been offering to take me to the gym for 7 years. And so I finally took him up on it. And at 5:30, going through a breakup and going off medication at the same time, I was in the gym and I hated it and I was crying through it, but I was teaching myself that I am in control of my life. Regardless of what I feel, my behavior does not have to be impacted. I'm going to teach my mind that I use it. I'm going to channel my emotions productively. And I'm not going to allow my emotions or my thoughts or the difficulty and the pain that it is to go through that and to be not numb anymore from the medicine. And the intensity of bipolar 1 requires a lot of discipline, but it is possible. I also do grounding and Reiki, which is from Eastern medicine, which actually, people think it's sort of woo woo or whatever, but Reiki is actually dealing with the quantum mechanics, the quantum physics of our body, because it's dealing with the fascia and energy. Fascia is like our third brain. So if our gut is our, first, our actual brain or our second brain, then the fascia is our third brain. Our fascia stores memories, emotions, and a lot of times when we have tightness in our muscles, it's related not physically to the muscle itself, but to the fascia tissue that are wrapping around. And we experience these stored emotions. And Reiki to me is like an oil change for the body. And I like to use Reiki along with therapy to help gain an awareness and release trauma and, emotional wounds in the process. Yeah, those are and the sauna. I'm big on the sauna. I love the sauna. And when I hated going to the gym, the sauna was like a nice sweet treat at the end. And it feels really good. 20 minutes in the sauna. I was in there for 30 today, 190 degrees. Let me tell you, beautiful. And cold showers. That'll teach you mental toughness also. And it decreases inflammation in the body. So I do all of those things weekly and daily for a lot of them. So I'm going to pass it, seeing this next question, I'm going to pass it over to Kit. For individuals experiencing their first episode of psychosis that want their symptoms to stop, what do you say to them? John asked that question. Go for it.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So there's most of the time when someone gets diagnosed with the psychotic disorder and goes on medication, there's a period where you're trying to see if it works or not, and if it works well. And there's dosage adjustments and different medication changes. And during that time, it's very stressful because sometimes people are aware of what's going on. They're aware that they're experiencing psychosis. In my case, when I was going on antipsychotics, I was aware that I was experiencing psychosis and hearing voices and that I had delusions. And so there was that moment where it was like I wanted the medication to kick in so that my symptoms would go away because I didn't like them. And so to the people that are in that state, don't give up. Like genuinely, please don't give up. There's a wonderful example that I love bringing up in this type of situation because there are people that say, I've tried all these medications and they don't work. I've tried this and it doesn't work. Nothing's really working. But the thing is, when it comes to antipsychotics and psychiatric medication, there's countless doses, combinations. There's tons of meds. I know there's over 30 different antipsychotic medications on the market right now. And there's so many different combinations of those things that you just have to hang on until you can find something that works. Because eventually, something will. And it's really important to hang on to the hope of that, the hope of getting relief eventually, thanks to psychiatric medication. And yeah, that's the big idea with it all. But there's also the frustration and reality that a lot of people who go on antipsychotics to treat psychosis still do experience some degree of symptoms. I believe on average, people get a reduction of around 50% of their psychotic symptoms. But that 50% is huge because that means if someone is hallucinating and having delusions and dealing with symptoms of psychosis 100% of the time, that's reduced by 50%. So antipsychotics and antipsychotic medication will provide relief. And if you hang on long enough, you'll get that relief. Even if it doesn't get rid of it entirely, because it's very rare to have it get rid of psychosis entirely. I know some people who it has, but it's not very common. But hang on to it, you'll get that relief. And even though you might still experience a little bit of symptoms, you'll know how to deal with them better because you have insight. And hopefully you'll go to therapy, like some of the stuff that Carolyn and I talked about earlier, to kind of deal with what's left. But yeah, if you want your symptoms to stop and you're just starting on the journey, don't give up. Keep going to doctor's appointments, keep trying the medications, keep taking the medications, and hopefully things will turn around. I really have faith that for a lot of people it does turn around and it does work. And there's a reason why a bunch of us take psychiatric medications to treat our psychosis because the medication, it works. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, who's next? Ooh, okay. Carolyn is next. So Carolyn, what would you say are the most misunderstood things about living with psychosis? You're
You're muted,
muted.
Carolyn.
You're
You're muted.
muted.
Well, now I know. Thank you. Um, yeah, this is a great question from Emily, and I think there's a few things that are misunderstood. The first being that when you deal with a lack of insight, which would be called anosognosia, which is having an unawareness of being in psychosis, people will ask me, how can I get my loved one to understand that they're in psychosis? How can I help them know that they're in psychosis? And the thing about having a lack of insight is that it's really not possible. You can try to get through to a person, but there's like a mental barrier in a person's mind where they aren't capable of understanding that they're in psychosis. It's kind of like a blind spot to them. And that's just one of the key symptoms. Not everybody has it. We've talked a lot about insight, where you are aware. I've had psychosis with insight, but most of the time I have it without insight. And my sister would always be telling me, there's no demons after you. You're just psychotic. And I'd think, well, that would be preferable to demons coming after me, but I know myself very well and I know that that's not right. But I would prefer to have psychosis. Thank you. And in a way, it kind of was like, um, it offered some relief to hear her say that because it did sound preferable to like demonic possession or whatever I thought was going on. And so even though I didn't believe her, I wanted to believe her. And I couldn't believe her, but I tried to believe her. And hearing her say that in a way really helped. It might not help everyone to be told that they're in psychosis. Some people may become like agitated to have their reality challenged. And I'm sure anyone can understand that if you say had a red car and someone said, no, your car is black, and they kept insisting, it might irritate you because you know full well what's real to you. And it's kind of the same way for people in psychosis. Also, psychosis isn't always this obvious thing. You might talk to a person in psychosis, even with a lack of insight, and not know that they're in psychosis. So a lot of people may think, that they've never met a person with psychosis because it's not always identifiable. But schizophrenia alone affects 1 in 300 people worldwide. So that's actually quite a lot of people that you may know without ever knowing. Some people can hide it really well, whether they want to or not. I know for me, I could have everyday interactions like at the grocery store when the cashier would ask, how's your day? I could say, oh, it's great. But then I wouldn't necessarily tell her about the spies that were after me, for instance. So it's not always something you can see or tell, which can make it really hard to catch and treat for some people. I know I went about 2 years in psychosis before getting treatment. And also, it can happen to anyone. It's not the case that the stereotype of the homeless bum ranting and raving in the street is true of everyone. It can happen to soccer moms, it can happen to lawyers, doctors, it can happen to college students of any variety. So there's a lot of reasons people go into psychosis, and it doesn't discriminate. Anyway, that's what I have to say about that. And the next question for all three of us is, what has been most helpful on your journey to where you are today? Conversely, what has been the least helpful? If you were to write a book about your life, what would you title it? And that's from H.B. Lowe.
Sean, do you
Yes.
want to kick it off? You want me
Oh
to kick
yeah,
it off?
I'll kick it off. I saw that.
Okay.
Yeah, my apologies. I think for me, the first thing that is the most helpful is, as I talked about, seeking an understanding and connecting with me. If we're talking about from an objective standpoint of what the most helpful things, I remember like when I had a plan, and I'm talking specifically about when I went off medication because there's a uniqueness to this part, and it was very lonely. But it didn't have to be as lonely as it was if people sought more of an understanding. And there were a few people that really did. And my Aunt Barb and my sister, who's my biological sister, I was raised an only child, it's a long story. I was adopted at birth, but that's where the Romero comes in at. But my sister and connecting with her, it was really cool. She was concerned, but she asked questions and she trusted me. And she trusted me to make the decisions that I was going to make in my journey, which empowered me to, it made me feel good. I didn't need anyone's approval because initially I didn't have anyone's approval but my own. Like everyone, the psychiatrist or nobody thought it was a good idea. But from my vantage point, I had never seen anyone live in my life, whether it was my biological parents or my adopted grandparents. Everyone that was on meds was always habitually hospitalized or wasn't able to live a normal life. And I had just been affected for 10 years. So I didn't really want to hear go on another medicine. I didn't really want to hear anyone's opinion. I had already made my decision. And it was a very strategic time-wise. I'd been working 3 jobs. I was funding my vices at that point because I was, hypersexuality, binge eating, compulsive gambling, check, 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 all my 20s. And the money was like I was living in a cycle. And when I got this promotion, and most of my work was in mental health, though, my full-time job. And when I got this promotion, I made more money and I could breathe. And a few months later, I made this decision and this jump to do something that I had never seen done before. And I was raised an only child. I like to get my way and I have big dreams and I have big goals and I've always chased what I wanted in life, whether that's with music or speaking or all these things that I ended up doing. And as a result of that, some of the worst moments in my life became the best things that ever happened to me. And I think that when that self-belief combined with when people were actually like seeking an understanding and seeing that I had a plan compared to the alternative when people are listening to rebuttal and confirm the bias that I was the patient and I needed to listen and I was a child, because that's how it often feels. It often feels like you're not listening enough because you know something about me, because I'm transparent, because I want to help people. And I've given you information and insight into my life, and I've been vulnerable with you. But you're using that to tell me what I should do, but you don't know what it's like to walk in my shoes. And you don't know what I'm capable of. And just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not possible. And that's sort of so if I could write a book about that, the title of the book would be um, I guess be authentic, be you, be limitless, and or something like the intersection, meet Scoe Romero at the intersection of courage, resilience, and compassion, something along those lines. So that might cover it. I'll pass it on. I think Carolyn's next on our list here. I'll pass it to Carolyn.
Thanks, Sean. I am a person who really thrives in a community, so I would have to say that community has been the greatest help for me. It offers relief from like the opposite of what I deal with, which would be social isolation. And that is something that I'm very, very heavily prone to. I had agoraphobia while I was going through one of my episodes for the 2 years I was psychotic, and coming out of that was enormously hard. And what really helped me was to latch onto a community. So I was very heavily involved with the recovery cafe in my area, and recovery cafes are kind of this really cool like hangout space where you can go to groups and have meals and hang out with other people. They're co-occurring, so they're for addiction and mental health, and they're all over the world. I also have kind of jumped ship and gone over to my local clubhouse, and clubhouses are like mental illness organizations. They're places where you can go and work on tasks together. I personally really like working on projects like the newsletter, or like working on improving the clubhouse itself, but you can make meals, you can do like tasks. So that's been really helpful for me because it's helped me to build on the social isolation I was experiencing, and also to follow through on tasks and have commitments and honor, commitments that I've dedicated myself to, and not break those commitments. But I would have to say, on the opposite side of that, what's been probably the hardest barrier for me was just no one would talk about psychosis. So after experiencing it and being really, really like down on myself, I didn't know anyone who talked about psychosis. So I felt really lonely. I felt like I was the only person that this ever happened to. I couldn't relate to anyone. It made me feel like I was in a bubble separated from the rest of the world. And one day I had a conversation with a woman with schizoaffective disorder where she shared some of the things she'd been through, which were like identical to my experiences. And it blew my mind because it was the first time actually heard someone talk about it. And so I started talking about it, and I discovered that it's not the case that people don't go through it. It's the case that people don't talk about it. And that can lead to further social isolation for me and others. So I try to be very transparent about it in my everyday life now without any shame, and just tell people about my experiences because I found that a lot of people can relate. And so, as far as having a book, I've actually been working on a graphic memoir. I love drawing and cartoons. So I've been
What?
drawing, I know,
That's
I've been
awesome.
drawing my experiences for I started a few months ago, and it's been really fun. And I would call it The Year That Never Was, because it's about my worst psychotic episode, which was like a whole year of my life that was just kind of overtaken. So that would be called The Year That Never Was. And maybe someday I'll finish it. I don't know. But I do share it on Instagram from time to time. And that being said, Kit, would you like to share?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Also, I definitely want to see that when it's done. Like that's awesome. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So, I would say the most hopeful thing for me was community for sure, like having friends that would listen to me. But I kind of want to spotlight my dad for a second because he's amazing. I call him Dadzo. I'm schizo kitzo and he's Dadzo. And he lives a mile down the road from me. So I live on my own in an apartment, and I'm able to do that because DBT gave me my life back. And my dad lives down the road from me. And so when I'm having symptoms, when I'm having episodes, because I still do have them even though I'm on medication, that's normal. Um, and he will come over and pick me up, and we'll go walk the mall, or we'll drive around, or we'll go shopping. He's just there for me. And I probably hang out with him over half the time during the week. Like we'll go to this local grocery store, in I'm from North Carolina, and we have a Lowe's grocery store. There's a Lowe's hardware, but there's also a Lowe's grocery store. And in the Lowe's grocery store they have like a little cafe where you can get like coffee and stuff. And so we'll go there and we'll do that. And that's fun. And I love doing that. But honestly, I call him throughout the day. I'm very, very, very close with my dad. He has been with me since the very, very beginning. And while he was not always on board with the fact that I was mentally ill, once he learned and realized that it was a serious mental illness, I did have a psychotic disorder, I experienced psychosis, bad things have happened to me because of my mental illness, he was all in on making sure that I was supported, that I was cared for. And while he technically is my primary caregiver, I would rather call him like a trust partner because he's someone who I trust to help me with my symptoms and my condition and also just help me out in other areas of my life. Like, for example, I also cosplay. That's one of my biggest hobbies. And he has a part of every cosplay I've ever made, except for like two of them. And so he helps me out with stuff beyond my illness and reminds me that I'm more than my mental illness. And so I love my dad. He's amazing. Go Dadzo. Yeah. But I would say the least helpful, it's it's actually not a big thing, which is kind of interesting, but it's just the least helpful thing for me is when I would confide in a friend or a family member and I would say what I was experiencing when it came to psychosis or my mood symptoms, and I would be met with silence. And being met with silence when I just dumped out something that was very vulnerable was very difficult for me. And so I learned in my recovery from my psychotic break that there were people that weren't going to support me in ways that I needed. And so I kind of had to not push people away, but not confide in those people because telling them these things and then being met with silence just was not helpful when I desperately needed someone to just say something. And I can't say I knew what I wanted people to say, but I wanted people to say something. And so not getting that something was really, really hard. But if I was to write a book, which I might one day, I think it'd be pretty interesting because I've had a wild life. Um, I would say it would center around probably my psychotic break, which was mainly all about religious delusions. And in short, I thought that the Christian God was basically in my head, hated me, and was telling me awful things that people I cared about weren't going to be here anymore. And there were a few interesting moments where angels played a role and demons played a role, and there was all this awful stuff that became like essentially the before and after moment of my entire life. Like I've split my life in half, and the before and after is like during my psychosis. And so I would probably write a book about that. And I think the title would be Demons on My Back and Angels in My Head. I think that would be the title of the book that I would write because it's just so deep in the religious side of things and I was so lost in it that that's honestly just how I felt about the whole thing. So yeah, good question. HG Low, good question. I mean, I've never actually told anybody the title of the book I'd write, but that was kind of cool that I had an opportunity to tell it to both Sean and Carolyn and the audience. So I will kick it off into the next question, which is Carolyn is also going to have some stuff to say about this one. So, and this is, oh, yeah, I'm excited about this one. Okay, so I gotta actually say it. So the question is by Heidi F. And she said, or he said, or they said, does a person experiencing psychosis who truly knows and understands what psychosis is know that they are experiencing psychosis when it is happening to them at that time? And I just talked for a bit, so I'm gonna let Carolyn start us out with that answer.
Oh, thank you, Kit. So this I love talking about anosognosia. So this is kind of like a double-sided coin for me because anosognosia, as I said, is a lack of insight. And as I also said, I draw comics. So in one of my episodes where I had absolutely no insight, I drew a comic which I looked at after the episode. And in the comic, I was like, "Oh, I'm talking to angels, and there's signs and everything." And I was diagnosed schizoaffective, but that's crazy, right? So I knew that I had schizoaffective. I mean, I knew I'd been diagnosed. I didn't believe it anymore. Like I could tell you what a delusion was. I could tell you what a hallucination was. But in the same breath, I could say, but that's not happening to me because what's happening to me is real. So the facts are there, like the understanding, just not like the personal application. But on the flip side, when I've had insight, I can say, okay, I know this is a delusion, which can be confusing even when you have insight, but I can at least identify, for instance, when I was working at my last job, I had a lot of hallucinations and I worked in a really busy grocery store in the deli. So I was constantly hearing people talking to me and I'd go to respond and there'd be no one there. And I'd think, okay, well, that was hyper realistic. That sounded like anything else, but it's clearly a hallucination. So that actually helped me a lot. It eased a lot of the distress knowing that I was hallucinating, even if I couldn't always tell because it is just so realistic. But you can have it both ways. You can understand fully, like with insight, that you're psychotic, or in my case, if you have anosognosia, you can know the facts without really necessarily applying it to yourself. So what would you like to say, Kit?
Oh, golly. So I kind of have a wild story about this one. So I've heard voices since I was 14 years old. And for many, many years, I did not know that they were voices. I just thought I was thinking creatively or thinking in conversation. And that is literally what I told myself. And twice a year, I would research on Google and be like, can you hear voices on the inside of your head? Because I heard them internally in the same inner headspace as one might find thoughts or an internal monologue. But it was like, can you have hear voices internally, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't come up with anything, nothing. And so I would go back and be like, I'm not hearing voices, no big deal, whatever. So fast forward to my psychotic break in 2018. I'm like in my early 20s. I just graduated college. And I was experiencing those religious delusions that I talked a little bit about earlier. And I kind of started having this natural residual phase to my episode because psychotic episodes, they have essentially three parts to them. They have the prodromal phase where things are building up and symptoms are starting to happen and things are starting to go wrong, essentially. Then you have the acute phase, which is where symptoms are at their most severe. Things are really bad. It's awful. It's horrible. That is essentially the break part of a psychotic break. And then you have a residual phase, which is the natural conclusion to a psychotic episode, which most of the time happens with medication. And so I had kind of entered a residual phase on my own, which is kind of weird. But I've also been really self-aware almost my entire life. And so when I entered that residual phase, I kind of started thinking maybe none of this is real. Things aren't adding up. Maybe this God that I believed in, maybe he's not real. And then I had this sinking thought that, oh, I'm hearing voices as well. And ever since that moment, when I realized I was hearing voices, I have always known that when I hear voices, because I hear them throughout the day and a couple times a week in conversation wise, whenever I hear them, I know I'm hearing voices. I know that they're hallucinations. And so it's kind of wild because I experience these symptoms so often, but I do have insight into them almost entirely. I don't have any anosognosia associated with it. And so when it comes to my voices, it's like that. But I do have other hallucinations that kind of pull me out of reality a little bit. Even though I still know I'm experiencing psychosis and I know that those things aren't real, they're still real in the moment, so I still have to deal with them. And that's really difficult to go through. And even though I've had years of therapy and I've been on medication for a long time and I've been dealing with this disorder since I was 14, essentially, I still struggle with being pulled into the reality of psychosis. But yes, people who know what psychosis is, that are educated about it, that understand how it affects them, yes, a lot of us do know that we're experiencing psychosis. And so many people think, I get so many comments about this. So many people think that because I know I'm experiencing psychosis when I'm experiencing psychosis, that it's not psychosis. And that is where I say that treatment changes everything, therapy changes everything, medication changes everything, lifestyle changes change everything. And that is the reality for many people. So yeah, that's my answer to that question. I'm so glad I got to answer that. Sean, passing it to you.
Yes, and I wasn't going to weigh in on this one, but you brought up a couple of things about awareness that I thought were really cool that
Yeah, go
reminded
for
me
it.
of my experience when I was hospitalized. I was hospitalized 2 weeks and then 3 weeks and then 4 weeks. So I would go back to school, and then by the third hospitalization, I was aware that I was having issues with, I was aware, kind of like dawning on me of like, oh, this isn't real. The people in the hospital are not famous. The people are not out to get me, my neighbors. And I also find some interestingly enough, like at 30 now and not having experienced psychosis, but experiencing more in a spiritual synchronistic type of way, or looking at certain parts of my illness as, I don't say illness to minimize, but more so like as I experience it now, it's more of a gift. I look at it in Eastern culture. And it's funny, one of the first delusions that I had was regarding being a prophet. And it is kind of coincidental or interestingly enough, I am certainly a very spiritual person that is here, as a messenger of sorts of sharing my journey to help people, right? And so there is an overlap in sort of some of that. So I thought that was interesting and it reminded me of the awareness that was developed over time. I didn't always have, when I was early on, I was in complete denial of, I'm fine and I'm not sleeping. Mind you, I'm sleeping like 1 or 2 hours, and all I wanted to do was go to the basketball game that I would never make it to. I played basketball in high school. Anyway, that brings us to the next question, which is Angela Ewan, or I think it would be Ewan. I'm not sure. EWEN. Thank you for the question. It says, what is the most effective way to de-escalate a situation? Now, I got my start in residential crisis services before working on 2 ACT teams when I worked directly with clients. And welcome to mental health, right? Here you go as a facilitator at 20 years old. And I had to get special trainings, and I was under the supervision of an LCPC. But one of the biggest things that I learned very quickly, and one that I was really good at, was everything has to be intentional and connective. And it's like connection, and everything matters. Your body language matters, your tone of voice matters, how grounded you are matters, the questions that you ask matter, the way that you connect. You have to build rapport in an instant with someone that's in crisis, especially if they're not an ongoing, client or patient that you're seeing. So everything is at stake. And keeping yourself grounded enough to understand that while also delivering results in the way that your ability to connect in those moments of de-escalating. And hey, I understand, like, when someone's like really yelling, and someone was irate one time in the backyard at the residential crisis house, and I remember he was having a severe bipolar swing. And I remember I've said, hey, I understand that, but sort of, I don't remember exactly what was said, but it was basically in the sense of validating their experience and having empathy for it, but also understanding, but this isn't the way that this will gain a result. What will this lead to? How I totally, I understand. It's sort of like utilizing motivational interviewing while simultaneously being completely and utterly intentional and building that trust as quickly as possible. So everything matters. They want to know that you're sincere. People want to know when I was struggling in the hospital, who did I like the most? The facilitator that actually gave a F about me. Excuse my language. I didn't say it, but the facilitator that actually connected with me to understand that I liked music, or the facilitator that when I was struggling, I was going to a specific person because they connected with me. So build that trust quickly, especially if you don't know someone well enough to do that. Kit, you have the last question, other than the ones that we're going to weigh in on if time permits, and that is, what are the risk factors for a psychosis onset? Alma had asked that question, Alma Gonzalez.
All right, let's talk some science because I love talking science. It's one of my biggest things I do in my content is I love talking science and linking science and lived experience together. So the biggest thing when it comes to psychosis and psychotic disorders is that there are genetic risk factors. And if someone has schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, or bipolar disorder, there's an increased risk for their first degree relatives to develop any three of those disorders. So if someone has schizophrenia, there's a chance that a first degree relative could actually end up with bipolar disorder. But these things aren't guaranteed, which is a good thing. But the things that could potentially set off these illnesses is stress. That is the biggest thing with it. For me, my psychotic break happened because I graduated college and lost a friend. And you might think graduating college, that's a good thing, right? Like why would that be a bad thing when it comes to psychosis? But even though it was a good thing, it was still very stressful. And big major life changes, moving to a new place, that's a stressful life event, even though it's super exciting for a lot of people. Starting college, that's stressful. That actually does make sense that maybe that would cause symptoms to happen because a lot of people do develop schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, and bipolar in college. And so stress is the biggest factor that contributes to this stuff. There's papers and papers and papers about it because there's the genetic stuff that puts you at risk for it, and then stressful life events can set it off, usually in early adolescence or early adulthood. And then you have the disorder. It basically activates the genetics. I guess you could say it just causes a cascade of like the actual illness to develop. But at the end of the day, we don't really know what causes these illnesses. We don't know why they necessarily happen. We just have correlations that say, oh, hey, this happened, so it kind of could be this, but we don't really do like correlation does not equal causation, right? So we don't necessarily have any true answers to why this stuff even happens. But what we do know is there are risk factors that are pretty simple, like someone's got schizophrenia, someone else could have bipolar. We know that's a thing, even if we don't know why. But stress usually sets off these illnesses when genetic risk factors are present, which is why these illnesses tend to run in families and they have issues from that. So yeah, that's the science of this presentation of this fireside chat we did. So yeah, that's fun. And if any of you guys want to weigh in on what you think any risk factors for psychosis onset could be, feel free to. But yeah, that's my sciencey answer for it.
I feel like
Oh, that
go
was
for
one.
it, Carolyn.
I would love, yes, I would love to touch on it a little bit. Aside from, mental illnesses like schizoaffective, bipolar, schizophrenia, psychosis can happen for reasons like, substances. Some people have substance-induced psychosis, which could either be from recreational drug use or from prescribed medication. Some medications that actually tend to cause psychosis that I've at least heard of are MAOIs, antihistamines, steroids. Um, so it could be a myriad of things, and typically what would resolve the psychosis would be stopping whatever substance it is. Though for some people, going into withdrawals from stopping a substance is what starts the psychosis. But nonetheless, coming off of the medication or substance will typically resolve it. You can also have psychosis from traumatic brain injuries. I know someone who does, and that can be an ongoing thing. You can have psychosis from childbirth. There's postpartum psychosis, much like postpartum depression. You can have it from sleep deprivation. So there's a lot of different causes because psychosis is essentially a symptom of a lot of different things. And so it can be a symptom of, substances, childbirth, etc. And when you treat the primary cause, you can treat the symptom of psychosis. So that's what I have to say about that.
Oh, that's good. Thank you for weighing in on that, especially the medication slash recreational drug use angle with it, because that's really
Yeah.
important to say. Yeah.
Yeah, you have
And
to be very careful even with what you're prescribed.
And I was going to say it wasn't related to that particular question. There was one specific thing that Patrick had submitted, which a lot of the other questions we had covered, but I wanted to share. It was regarding addiction and someone having been taken advantage of or living in the house and breaking in the house. He was asking essentially the specific part of his question was regarding letting people back in the house after they stole cars or have taken advantage of people. He also commented on whether we talk about addiction and mental health separately or together. They're absolutely interchangeable, and there are still some of the same things at place. It kind of goes back to remembering our role. And if it's a personal experience with a loved one, then, well, love has boundaries, and your personal space, if it's your actual space, then that's there's a fine line between enabling and helping, and reminding, we're empowering people to make their choices. And if that goes against the idea, like if this person's breaking significant rules, then they don't belong, they're not ready for, and think about the amount of impact that has on the other folks in the house, even if it's a treatment house. Now, if it's mandatory treatment and it's supposed to be related to, um, you know, that type of thing, then it's a little bit different. You have to abide by the rules of that are set in place. But my LCPC therapist's first boss had a magnet, and it said that our behaviors, our Our emotions, it doesn't give you an excuse. Your emotions and your experiences don't give an excuse to just be whatever, right? There is a line, and not all behavioral isn't always related completely to psychological and emotional. So just wanted to share that part. Yeah. Anyway, thank you all. I touched on
Yeah.
one of the last questions, and I know we're at time right now, so thank you all for having
Thank
us.
you for tuning in, everybody.
Kit and Carolyn, great working
Thank
with you.
you.
Thank you, Cassie, as well.
Wow, that was so beautiful and so vulnerable. Thank you guys all so much, Kit, Carolyn, Sean. It's really inspiring just to hear your guys' stories, and again, just for you guys to be so vulnerable. That's amazing. I definitely think this world could use a lot more transparency with psychosis itself for someone who's gone through psychosis herself and currently works with individuals who are experiencing psychosis. It's very inspiring, and you guys are inspiring a lot of hope for a lot of people. So keep doing what you guys do. Amazing, amazing keynote. Thank you so much. I now want to transition us to a 10-minute break. So if you will, don't forget to check out the features on the platform. There's a lot of cool things on there. You can see the agenda, connect with people throughout the conference. So we will see y'all back at 9:50. Thank you.